Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Kind of depends on which corner of the world you're joining us from. Welcome to this conversation focused on micro-credential pathway adoption in Rhode Island. I'm Virgil Hammonds, the CEO of the Aurora Institute. Our mission at the Aurora Institute is to advance breakthrough policies and practices that ensure high-quality learning for all. We envision a world where all learners have the opportunity to attain the knowledge, skills, and dispositions that ensure their success, contribute to community, and advance society. Now let's dive into the webinar. And as educators who have been through teacher prep programs, we recognize that teacher prep has largely gone unchanged. But there are states and organizations that are thinking differently about how to approach teacher certification and instituting more learner-centered approaches that are job-embedded and validated through demonstrations of competence. But as we have been inspired to do so here in this slide, if we could do introductions, let us know who you are, what's your role, where your organization is located, and perhaps where your location is. I invite you to do so in chat. Hey, Scott, it's been a minute. Good to see you on. And hello, Gary. Look at all these friends. It's wonderful. Good to see you all. Thanks for being here. Michigan, New York, Kansas City, South Africa. All right. See, that's wonderful. Well, glad you all can join us as we continue to post who we are, what role we serve, how we lead, and where you're joining us from. Want to make you aware that this spring, in partnership with UCLA Center X, Excel Leadership Academy, and the state of Rhode Island, we released a paper that speaks to the implementation of an ESOL, or English for speakers of other languages, micro-credential and teacher certification. But before we begin, I also want to take this moment to do a land acknowledgement and recognize that this virtual webinar takes place on lands that have been home to Indigenous people since time immemorial. I want to give you all, or each of us, a moment just to reflect on the statement posted. I come to you from Farmingdale, Maine, which is on the traditional unceded land of the Wabanaki. I invite you to explore the link, which will be posted here shortly in chat, to explore the history of the land you are joining us from. But for now, I would like to pretend I'm an Olympian and hand off to my incredible colleague, Jennifer Kabacher, our Director of Strategy and Partnerships, who will introduce our friends from the UCLA Center X Leadership Academy and Rhode Island and their great work and partnership. Jennifer, thank you.
Thanks so much, Virgil, and I appreciate the timely Olympics reference here. I aspire to reach even remotely the greatness that our Olympians have reached this year. Good morning, everyone, coming to you from the West Coast, where it is still very much morning. I'm so excited that you're all here to join us today for this conversation on a topic very near and dear to my heart around competency-based professional learning and certification for educators. Virgil and I are really excited to have Dr. Lorene Avery from UCLA Center X's Excel Leadership Academy, who will share with us about their MLL micro-credential pathway, including its theory of change, and Kristen Ray from the Rhode Island Department of Education, who will tell us about Rhode Island's unique teacher certification and endorsement system. Today, we're talking about competency-based teacher certification and the policy shifts needed to be in place to make them accessible for more educators. And specifically, we'll be discussing a program that uses micro-credentials to provide educators with competency-based recognition for their learning, regardless of where they learned it or where they use it. So what is a micro-credential? A micro-credential starts off by identifying a specific skill or competency that an educator wants to receive recognition for. So you could think of that as being very bite-sized, like demonstrating wait time, or something much larger like the skills we're discussing today around supporting multilingual learners. The micro-credential then captures or identifies evidence that the educator can use to demonstrate that specific competency. And then after the educator collects that evidence, someone in the back end goes in and assesses the evidence the educator submitted against a rubric to determine whether the educator has successfully demonstrated competence. If the educator has not successfully demonstrated competence, they have the opportunity to go back and try again and receive feedback for what they did. And ultimately, if the educator does demonstrate competence, they receive a digital badge associated with that specific competency that they can take with them in their portfolio to their district, however they choose to use it. Digital Promise, which was one of the first organizations to develop an educator micro-credential ecosystem, said that micro-credentials are digital certifications that verify an individual's competence in a specific skill or set of skills. So keeping that in mind, the UCLA Excel Leadership Academy developed a set of 12 micro-credentials that captured the both essential and advanced skills that educators need to effectively serve multilingual learners. First, the state of Rhode Island approved the first 6 micro-credentials, those essential skills, for their MLL endorsement, which educators can earn to differentiate their skills from their peers. And then in late 2023, the state approved the full set of 12 micro-credentials, both the advanced and the essential skills for their ESOL certification program. So an educator that earns all 12 can become certified in the state to teach a standalone ESOL class. Today, we're going to hear from both Excel and RIDE about what policy and approaches made this possible. But before we get to that, to frame the conversation, I'm going to start us off with the state and district policy recommendations that we identified through the case study that other states could use to make this similar system a reality for educators in their state if they're looking to provide competency-based teacher certification opportunities. First, we found that it was vital for the teacher certification approval process to allow programs that are competency-based. And what we mean by that is that educators can earn them by demonstrating competence or mastery, not just by attending a specific course or set of courses for a certain amount of time. It's also very important that certification programs be allowed to be non-graduate credit bearing. And by that, we mean that the certification program is not necessarily tied to a graduate course or provide graduate credits, so that organizations besides institutions of higher education can also provide certification training. And we also found that it was really key that the programs be hybrid, virtual, and asynchronous, both for the purposes of flexibility for educators and so that more educators who don't want to attend in-person coursework or more traditional systems can access those, because we know teachers have a lot going on in their lives in addition to their full-time jobs. Another unique component of the RIDE approval process that Kristen will speak about in a bit is that it's rubric-based. So when a certification program is applying for approval in the state, they submit a binder full of documentation that's assessed via a rubric. And that allows more flexibility for non-traditional programs who are gaining approval. We also found that it was really important that states provide educators with different opportunities to differentiate your skills. So we'll hear in a bit that Rhode Island has not only the certification program, but also an endorsement program for educators, which allows them to differentiate themselves through a less intensive process than certification might require. To make these visions a reality, we really encourage states to fund pilot programs that both test the interest and the efficacy of competency-based certification programs in their states, and then really get them a runway to get moving. And finally, we believe it's really important for states to assess the alignment between their competency-based education or teacher certification processes and other skills-based credentialing efforts in the state, such as industry credentials or pathways. And this can bring more coherence to workforce development systems overall in the state. Through this case study, we also took a look at one specific district in Rhode Island, Central Falls, where both teachers are required to get their ESOL certification, but at the same time, a cohort of administrators are also earning the 6 essential micro-credentials for their MLL endorsement to build their own skills. And based on that case study, we identified some district policy recommendations for districts that are hoping to really encourage their educators to engage in competency-based professional learning as well. First, and as I mentioned, it was a really unique situation where the administrative team has committed to earning those 6 micro-credentials for the MLL endorsement. And that is such an important way for administrators to model their commitment to continuous learning at their level, in addition to what they want their educators to do. And we also found that it was vital for districts to provide meaningful time for collaboration and learning for these professional experiences. And as you'll hear in a bit, the Excel program includes a cohort and coaching model for exactly this purpose. We noted that it's very important for districts to enable and allow for certification programs that are asynchronous and job embedded. The micro-credentials that we're talking about here today specifically enable the educators to collect evidence from their daily practice to demonstrate their skills. It's not just about time that they spent learning in a classroom. And it's also vital for those districts to provide multiple pathways to meet requirements. Some educators in Central Falls preferred to stay with traditional certification programs for their ESOL requirement, whereas others are running after the Excel program because of the flexibility it provides. Finally, we found that it was very vital for districts to design communities of practice around this work. And those communities of practice can both be among the educators within the district who are all working towards the same goal, or in partnership with districts that are nearby who may be tackling similar challenges or addressing similar priorities. And now, with all that framing in mind, I'm really excited to welcome Lorene and Kristen to this conversation so we can learn a bit more about their unique programs and approaches. I'm gonna cut our screen share here so that we can see their faces. And so, Lorene, I'd love to start with you. Can you describe the Excel micro-credential program? How does it work? What makes it different from other teacher credentialing programs?
Sure, happy to do that. And hello to everyone. Nice to see some familiar names in the chat, and yeah, and happy to do that. Always happy to talk about Excel. So what is Excel and what makes it different? I think I want to start by telling you that the folks that we work with are they're already teachers for the most part in Rhode Island and most states. The ESOL and the BDL the bilingual dual language certification are add-on certifications. So teachers are already certified working in the classroom. They're classroom teachers or content area teachers. And that really shaped our program and how it continues to evolve. Excel started as a fairly traditional professional development program, really aimed at supporting the mainstream classroom teacher, someone who's a science teacher or a 3rd grade teacher and has an increasing number of multilingual learners in their classroom that they're really not prepared to work with. It grew from that basis, and that shaped it in many ways. We never set out to create a pathway to certification. It was actually the teachers that pushed us to do that. So in a lot of ways, our work reflects the program today looks like it does because of that beginning. Excel is fully competency-based, and again, that means that participants need to demonstrate mastery of some stuff, some specific skills and knowledge that we believe every teacher needs to master, to demonstrate mastery of, to work effectively with multilingual learners. And those competencies and skills are based on national standards from TESOL and NABE and so the other major organizations, national organizations in the field. The competencies themselves cover things like instruction and assessment. What does that look like when you are working with MLLs, as well as the more complex questions maybe that get into the interplay between language development and literacy development and reading issues and everything else. So they cover a pretty broad range of skills. They go well beyond just how to modify a lesson plan. Every individual in the program works on individual projects in their classroom, sometimes in their school, sometimes they're a little broader based. They do something, they engage in learning, they create a lesson or a program or an initiative, implement it, collect feedback from it, and submit a portfolio of evidence online. It's assessed online against the a very, very clear rubric. So we're different from a traditional teacher certification program. Although I'd be remiss if I didn't say, I think perhaps most teacher certification programs have competency-based elements in them now. I think it's an encouraging sign to see the move to that. But the difference is really in the laser focus on the skills and competencies just needed to work with MLLs, and the fact that we are working with teachers who have students in front of them, and the programs are developed and deployed in real time, so they impact the students who are sitting in front of the students, in front of the teachers today. It's not something that teachers learn about and bring back. So.
Right. And what challenges were you trying to address when you were developing the micro-credential program? It's really unique in that it's asynchronous, it's fully job embedded. You have a coaching and cohort model. Talk a bit about that.
Yeah, going way back, this program has been in development for, I want to say coming up on 15 years. Was driven by sort of the school-based, district-based, state-based need for teachers who could work with multilingual learners. Like this, a lot of this grew out of the early accountability reports, and like, quite honestly, schools getting for the first time the achievement gaps between their English learners and other students were really starting to show up and starting to take on maybe a heightened level of importance than they had before. So schools were looking for solutions, training solutions, and that's part of where we really started. And the other sense of urgency came from the teachers that we've always worked with, who, teachers get up and go to work every day and they want to be successful, and nobody, particularly in that environment, wants to say, I'm trying, I'm working hard, and I just don't know what to do. I don't have the skills in my toolkit to do this, to work with. Nobody wants to feel that way. So we had sort of those competing urgent requests from multiple parts of the educational ecosystem, and brought them together and started looking for really digging into what works. And this started with what I think of now as the first initial, the first 6 micro credentials, sort of the more broad-based basic skills, and just started to find that as teachers got into them, that there was a need for skill development all across the level. Some teachers wanted to go further, some were fine. So those needs really drove the development of the program and continue to drive it. I mean, I never think we're done. We're still evolving.
Thanks so much. And so, Kristen, tell us a bit about what's happened in Rhode Island. So you have both this teacher endorsement and the certification program. Can you explain to us what those mean specifically in Rhode Island?
Absolutely, Jennifer. So in many states, an endorsement is equivalent to what we consider certification. Can you still hear me? Because I see that I'm frozen.
Yeah, we can hear you great.
Okay, great. So in Rhode Island, an endorsement does not actually qualify you to teach in a content area. However, our endorsements indicate that you have gone through additional professional learning in a field. For instance, our MLL endorsement indicates that you have completed professional learning in working with and teaching MLLs. Now, this will signify to a district that you have that, so that you are more marketable, but mostly it's about the idea of lifelong learning and bettering your craft. And so that's what an endorsement means in Rhode Island.
Great. And how is that distinct from the certification programs themselves?
Generally speaking, and as you can see with the micro credentials, the first 6, like, it's a shorter program. This doesn't have to be at a traditional EPP or an approved EPP in Rhode Island. Instead, we have approved endorsement providers, and these look very different depending on which provider it is. Could range from modules, micro credentials, some asynchronous work, or synchronous, in-person training. They vary a lot. But a certification program is what we actually approve to lead to teacher certification in Rhode Island.
Got it. And so Rhode Island has a pretty unique approval process for teacher certification programs. Can you tell us a bit about that? Because that is really the mechanism that made it possible for the EXCEL program to be a certification program in the state.
Absolutely. I am very proud of our credentialing and approval process in Rhode Island. We have a set of standards, the standards for educator preparation in Rhode Island. And we utilize those and the rubric that's aligned to those standards to assess both new programs and existing programs on a cyclical basis. So when a program or when an education preparation provider wishes to start a new program, for instance, like EXCEL had, they submit, as Jennifer talked about earlier, a very thick binder that goes through all the different standards and aligns with our rubric. I then review them, and we generally provide rounds of feedback, and it's an iterative process to ensure that all of the programs meet all of our standards for rigorous quality educator preparation in Rhode Island. And then similarly, we also go out and review programs on a cyclical basis and continue their approval in Rhode Island. So it's not just a one-time we're approving your program and now you are approved forever. We go with a review team comprised of ed prep folks in other states and distinguished educators in Rhode Island who then review artifacts for days and have interviews and then provide feedback so that EPPs can go through continuous improvement, and we actually rate them and ensure that Rhode Island is producing quality educators.
Great, thank you. Now, Lorene, back to you. What has adoption of the EXCEL micro-credential program looked like so far in Rhode Island as well as in other states?
So I'll start by picking up on the very thick binder. It is indeed a very thick binder. For EXCEL, I can only speak for our experience. It was a multi-year experience. When we started it, looked at the rubrics, looked at the requirements, and thought, yeah, okay, we got this. And we obviously put a serious effort into it, but the iterative process and the feedback that we got, I want to say particularly as we because we've also been through the process for the bilingual dual language certificate, really pushed our thinking, and for me, got me completely out of my head where where maybe at times, I would think, well, like I'm the expert. We know this works because we said it does. The spirit of competency base is really evident in there, and it was a rigorous, challenging process for us, but and I imagine for other people also. But the product is so much better for it. So thank you for that. The binder was a lot of fun to put together also. But so that is what that was the gateway to Rhode Island, and I think common sense would tell you, as well as the experience that we have, that when there's a partnership with the state, with the districts, with the school leadership, the process is different, the impact is different. Teachers they're busy people. Lot of demands every year, more demands on teachers' time, and the teacher who comes to us who I want to say this in a positive way, it's a rare teacher who comes to us seeking professional growth when it's not something that their state district school is backing in a meaningful way. It's like if you're not going to pay a teacher, if you're not going to certify them for it, well, the chances of them doing it are less. So just that process alone in the state has made this really meaningful for teachers. And it is not just the learning, but it is meaningful to teachers in the sense that the state is recognizing what they're doing as important and they're willing to put resources in it. We have had in the past year in Rhode Island, we've certified 5 ESOL teachers. We have one certified bilingual dual language teacher, our first one. You're going to hear from someone who's, I think, going to be our second. We also have again, more evidence of this in New Hampshire. We have 10 ESOL certified teachers. They don't do a direct certification process like New Hampshire. It's a little bit of an alternative roundabout way, but they're making it work. And in Nashua and Manchester in particular, states that have really urgent needs, this has filled a huge gap for so those partnerships matter, when things that are important to the state. I know sometimes the state feels like they don't have a direct connection or impact on the teachers, but from my vantage, I can tell you that's not true. It's been the difference. We have programs in many other states, and not only is the numbers are smaller, but the commitment, people take a few micro-credentials. That's fine. That's what they want and need. But we don't have the pathway to completion without the certification, without the state support for it.
The value proposition for the educator. Yeah. I realized we didn't talk about this before, but how long does it typically take an educator to earn the MLL endorsement or the ESOL certification?
Really varies. It's, we say it's self-paced, and we really mean that. Many teachers, we have a cohort in Rhode Island that started in January. Most of them have completed the first 6 and earned the MLL endorsement, and surprisingly have been working all summer. And I think will earn the full ESOL certification within a year. So.
Got it. Thank you. And what have you heard from educators who've earned the micro-credentials for the full certification or the endorsement about what this has meant for their professional learning, for their classrooms, for their growth, for their students?
Yeah, so many nice things. And I know that you're going to hear from some of them. And maybe the best way to address that, excuse me, is to tell you that our journey to being certification providers came from the teachers. Was not something that we ever set out to do. Again, we were very happy providing professional development, sort of on a contract basis with schools and districts. And the teachers were the ones who pushed us for that, because they said, the skills and knowledge that we've acquired and mastered and demonstrated are the equal to anything that their colleagues were coming back. I always like to say that Excel's a pathway. It's not a better pathway. It's the right pathway for some people. And they really pushed us down this pathway. And I think probably there's so many heartwarming stories, a lot of feel good. But I think the thing that's impressed me the most over the years is the number of teachers who start, with an interest, 3rd grade classroom teacher, and they just want to build their skills, and they really get the bug, and they go on to become not just ESOL teachers, but many of them are becoming leaders in the field. And it's really nice to see them grow and follow their hearts through the pathways.
Thanks so much, Lorene. So as Lorene mentioned, we have videos from two educators who unfortunately were unable to join us today. The first is from David Upegi, who's an educator in Central Falls, Rhode Island, that district that I mentioned before. They serve a very large newcomer population. And a couple years ago, in their updated teacher contract, they required all educators to earn their ESOL certification. And as I mentioned, additionally, the administrative team committed to also earning the MLL certification, or excuse me, the MLL endorsement to really, as I say, put their money where their mouth is and join their educators on that learning journey. So David's going to tell us a bit about his experience with the micro-credential program. All right.
Greetings, everyone. My name is David Upegi, and I am a science teacher at Central Falls High School in Rhode Island, my alma mater. I am so joyful to be back there. In Central Falls, more than half of our students are multilingual learners. And to better serve them, the district and the union leadership have made ESOL certification mandatory for all teachers. Initially, we were offered a 5-course pathway to certification with in-person sessions as part of a cohort. But then came Excel, a game changer. Because the Excel pathway is flexible, it's job embedded, and it is asynchronous. And so it provided me an avenue to earn my certification. On my own time and with my own speed, I was able to show proficiency, knowledge, and skills. Therefore, I was able to complete all the required micro-credentials to receive ESOL certification from the Rhode Island Department of Education. Importantly, it wasn't just about the content knowledge, but it was about applying what I already knew and reflecting on my own experiences as a teacher. I asked myself, how could I better serve my students, all of them? And that's where Excel really helped me to hone in my skills. Thanks to Excel, I gained valuable skills and improved my teaching approach. This translates into better outcomes for all of my students. So if you're looking for a way to empower your students, I highly recommend you check out the Excel program. Thank you.
All right. And next, we're going to hear from Matthew Lim, who's an educator in Cypress Hills, Brooklyn, who's earned the micro-credentials and is also a coach for the Excel program. Oops. Here we go.
Hi, my name is Matt Lim, and I'm assistant principal here in New York. I got involved in the Excel micro-credential program a few years ago when I was first starting to learn how to teach. My master's program did not offer a multilingual credentialing program at the time, and so it was really exciting for me to have this opportunity and to be able to learn best practices and skills that I needed to make sure that the rigorous curriculum that I built was accessible to my multilingual learners, of which there were many who were coming to our school. And I want to make sure that that access was there regardless of language proficiency, because as a humanities teacher, I knew that language was one of my responsibilities. Participating in the micro-credential program shifted my professional learning by thinking about how to build my work around cycles of inquiry. And what I mean by that is that everything we do in Excel is about learning from best practices in research, developing a plan that is locally contextualized for who is in front of you. And then what I think is the most important part, applying that and then reflecting on what does the data show you? We know that practice does not make perfect, but practice definitely makes progression. Practice definitely makes automatic. And so a lot of the things that we produce through our plans gave us data that we could then analyze and say, how can we better refine these principles that we learn about to make sure that they meet the needs of literally the kids in front of us every day? The second thing it did was it pushed me outside my teacher blind spots and helped me start to think about the systems that contribute to education for multilingual learners. And I'm talking about school systems, right? What are the multilingual supports in your school? What does the coordinator do? How do access scores work? How are reader scores applied in the classroom? And I'm also thinking about district-wide supports. How does policy and law impact the kids in front of me every day? And lastly, the professional learning that I learned through the micro-credential program is that learning is often done in isolation, right? Professional development is all about sometimes sitting there, internalizing that information and think about how that applies to your own practice. But the micro-credential program is structured in such a way that I can find other colleagues in my school who are brilliant educators, who are doing very similar work aligned to my values. And we can then create and advocate for, and we did, better supports for the kids in our classrooms. And as an Excel coach, I think that my professional growth is elevated to the next level and that I'm able to then build capacity in others to lead. It's really exciting to be a teacher who learns these practices and then become a teacher leader that brings other folks into the fold, regardless of the context that they come from or regardless of the experiences that they bring. It's really exciting to be able to work with teachers who have different contexts from me, who are rooted in the same values of believing that education should be accessible to all of our students. And it really trained me in accountability because we know that accountability does not happen when you say the expectation. Accountability happens when you take ownership over your growth, over your roles and responsibilities. And for all teachers, for all educators, for all administrators, language development is our responsibility. And so to be an Excel coach allowed me to see that high student outcomes come from that belief.
Thanks so much to both Matthew and David for sharing their thoughts here. So to wrap up this little discussion portion, I have one last question for both Kristen and Lorene. So Kristen, what recommendations do you have for states who want to engage in a similar credential or a certification approval process? And what's coming next in Rhode Island around this work?
Great questions. I think that the big thing is to have a set of standards by which you're evaluating ed prep in your state. From these standards, you can make determinations about programs and about structures and content in the programs without pigeonholing programs into being institutes of higher education, because they don't have to be, nor do they have to lead to graduate credit. I'd say that if you're interested, I'm happy to talk more about Rhode Island's process with you, and you can contact me and email me and we can set up a call. I can also tell you that in Rhode Island, we've just revised our process, and not to say that we've changed a ton, but our process hadn't been revised in 11 years. And so I just finished a large project of the revision of this process to kind of ensure more efficiency and continuous improvement in partnership with our EPPs, to be more of a collaborator and a partner with them, as opposed to, an assessor and a compliance, from a compliance perspective. But like I said, I'm happy to talk to anyone who's interested in this. I can put my email in the chat for you.
Thanks so much, Kristen. And Lorene, what thoughts do you have about what a program like the Excel Micro-Credentials means for educators?
Yeah, I would echo a lot of the things that Kristen just said. And, we see and we hear all the time, there's a little skepticism from teachers when I spend a lot of time on the phone with teachers who say can you talk to me? Because I don't really believe that, it's self-directed and you're in charge, it's your learning, it's your journey, you're in charge of it. How long does it take? As long as you want it to. It's, those are, teachers are skeptical, right? Because they don't really believe that. But when we can get people, and again, this is the right pathway for some people, not for all people. But seeing the blossoming and, in taking control of that learning journey is beautiful. It's wonderful to see. And as a direct result of the EPP education program provider partnerships that Kristen manages in Rhode Island, we've started to work on pipelines, I think is maybe a good name for them, where through partnerships with organizations like the University of Rhode Island and College Unbound, we've been doing some work with the refugee community, and we're starting to look at all along the way how we can take people through the pre-service, through the certification, through the bilingual certification process, you know, and onto the master's level and becoming future leaders in the field. So that wouldn't happen without the opportunity to be part of this conversation. And again, you know, just creating many ways there's many things that bring teachers into teaching and propel them through, and creating pathways to meet all of those individual needs has been an honor to do it, and so much fun to see it flourish and grow. And I
Thanks.
will also put my email in the chat. I'm always happy to talk to anyone about this.
Thanks so much, Lorene. So we're going to open it up to folks for Q&A. If you could go ahead and put any questions you have in the webinar chat, I will lob them to Kristen and Lorene as appropriate. And Lorene, I'm noticing a lot of questions here about the mechanics of the micro-credentials themselves. So maybe you can spend a little time talking about how once an educator identifies the micro-credential, they earn what they want to earn, what exactly they do. And then Phyllis here asks, who reviews and evaluates the evidence submitted in the portfolios? What are their qualifications, and what's the feedback process look like specifically?
Okay. So we spent a lot of time, we partner with Bloomboard. They're our learning management system partner, I think is probably the best name for it. But you know, they work with micro-credential based programs all over the country, all different sorts of, and we spent a lot of time on the front end defining the competencies that teachers need, and figuring out the best structure for the portfolio to demonstrate that. So, you know, once that's done, the rest of it becomes pretty easy. So portfolios are submitted online, and you know, they have a very easy to navigate interface where teachers put the elements up. And Bloomboard has one of the reasons that we do partner with them is they have a really rigorous, vibrant assessment arm. Bloomboard does all the assessment for us. You know, intentionally, we create that lets us be coaches and facilitators and mentors. We create the rigorous indicators, and they measure the portfolios against them. So, you know, with putting the work in up front to sort of ask the right questions, and they have a really, every portfolio is assessed by 2 individuals. They go through always, you know, there's a lot of training and quality checks built into their process. They do a really nice job on it. When teachers, if they do not meet all of the competency indicators on any given portfolio, and you do have to complete them all to, you know, to demonstrate mastery. There's no grades in this. You've either demonstrated mastery or you have not yet demonstrated mastery. If you've met, say, 3 of the 4 indicators, you get feedback saying, you know, you haven't met this 4th indicator. Here's what you have to do, and teachers have the opportunity to respond just to that indicator. They don't have to go back and redo everything. They just add the pieces that are missing or unclear. So
Great.
okay, I don't think there was more to that question.
Yeah, I think you hit it all. Kristen, I think this is a question for you. Does the Rhode Island MLL endorsement or ESOL certification have requirements around demonstrating proficiency in languages other than English?
The MLL one does not. To be an ESOL teacher, you do not. However, to be a BDL teacher, you do.
And that's the distinction between your ESOL certification and your bilingual educator certification. Is that correct?
I mean, it's one of the distinctions.
Okay.
I think there are some other things, and Lorene could speak to this too in their programs, that there are other skills that a bilingual dual language teacher needs that, for instance, an ESOL teacher may not. For instance, to bilingual dual language teachers need to be certified in their content as well.
Got it. Thanks. Now, Lorraine, I realize we did not talk much about your cohort and coaching model, and Alyssa here has asked this exact questions. Is there ongoing support for educators as they move through the credentials and after? For example, is there a cohort community attached to the experience?
Yes, we do. We put everybody in facilitated teams. The facilitators are, I think right now are all people who have been through the program. Some are still going through it themselves, and they work with teams. It depends. Sometimes they're school-based, sometimes they're virtual. A lot of times they're somewhere in between that. And the facilitator coordinates with us. We have periodic facilitator meetings. So, in part, they're a two-way communication vehicle, but they provide support to their teams in whatever way makes sense. Some teams like to meet in person every month. Some teams never want to get together. Some have virtual office hours, or Saturday morning work sessions are very popular. We really let the facilitator and team members figure out what works best and support that. We also have a network of mentors who support the facilitators, because, obviously that's a key role, and we want to keep them learning and growing, and we want to keep learning and growing from them. And as I don't know if you picked this up with Matt, but Matt was a participant, has been a facilitator. He's a mentor for folks in another state now. David has just received his certification, and he's busy right now. In the spring, he's going to take on probably a facilitation role for us as well. So yeah, we stay in touch. It's a network-based organization, and we keep the people involved for as long as they want to be, because they in turn become the coaches for the next set of folks going through.
Thanks. Now, Gary asks, and I think, Lorraine, this is mostly a question for you, but Kristen, there might be aspects of this question for you as well. He says, when he was working on this big challenge, and I had the pleasure of working with Gary on micro-credentials back in the day, very often there was where you ran up against the wall was getting buy-in from the districts. And so he's curious how you're working with districts around buy-in.
So a couple of years ago, I feel your pain, Gary. We had, not surprisingly, challenges working with districts when, there'd be a leadership change, priorities change, and there were several times when we walked away from teachers sort of mid-program. Wasn't what they wanted, wasn't what we wanted, but it was what we had to do. And we intentionally, 3 or 4 years ago, made the switch to thinking about our clients, our partners, our individual teachers. We work hard to get district support for the teachers, we don't ignore that, but our contract, if you will, is with teachers, not with districts, and it's been a game changer for us, and gives us the opportunity also to support teachers move districts, they move states. Sometimes, we've had teachers move to new states where they've been the seed for a brand new program. So yeah, that's how we do it.
Thanks. Go ahead,
I'll
Kristen.
add to that a little bit. Gary, in the MLL population in Rhode Island is the fastest growing MLL population in the country, according to the last couple of years of data. So we are actually having a lot of districts that are super bought in to preparation for MLLs. So some of our districts, the urban core districts, are actually requiring ESOL certs in addition to people's content certifications. And so this is definitely helping programs like Excel's because they're requiring it. So it's a bit easier to get them to see the benefit and to provide whatever kind of accommodations are necessary for their teachers who are pursuing this program to like have some leave time to go do observations or go teach in other grade levels. And so I think that that's really important if districts are seeing the importance of the growing MLL population and servicing them. That's another way to frame it.
Thanks, Kristen. Now, Lorene Scott asks, how specific are the learning objectives for educators in the various competency areas in the micro-credentials? And he's asking if you could give a few examples along with the associated mastery thresholds to illustrate exactly how that works.
Sure. Yeah, they're quite specific. Each of the 12 micro-credentials focuses on a different area. Maybe one of the essentials micro-credential focuses on equitable assessment. So the learning objectives are about, I'd have to look up the actual wording, but it's about understanding how assessment gives you information about language development as well as content development, how to distinguish between the two, and use the information in in your own teaching. And the portfolio element, one of the portfolio elements for it is you're required to take an assessment that you're using. Could be formative assessment, could be a state assessment, or like a big A assessment, your choice. You actually have to do 2 of them for this, so many people choose one of each. You have to examine it, you have to reflect on what you're learning from it, you have to make 2 modifications to it that you think will get you better information. You have to show those modifications, administer it to multilingual learners, give samples of student work, and write an analysis of what you learned. Question is not, did you pick the right assessments? The question is, what did you do? What was your thinking about it? What did you learn? And then the final piece is, and like, now what? Or you may choose, you may say, well, I didn't get the information I wanted, so I'm going to try something else, or this was great, I'm going to expand it to, like, those are open-ended. So it's that process of thoughtfully doing something, showing how you did it, how you reflect on it, and what you've learned from it. That those are the specific processes that we go through in each micro-credential.
Thanks, Lorene. And I think we have probably time for 1 or 2 more if folks want to get that in there. So Melissa and I have been talking about teacher micro-credentials for a long, long time. So hey, Melissa, great to see you here. She asked Lorene, you said that this process is for some people, but not all people. Can you say more about who is likely to be or not likely be a good candidate for the micro-credential program or similar ones?
Yeah, I think it's, all teachers are busy. Like, I'll start with that. It's great for busy people, but I think most programs have flexibility for adult learners now. I can't tell you why, but one of the first things people say to us is, oh, I'm so happy I don't have to write research papers. So, some people, I personally, I love to write a good research paper, love to read them, love to research them. I think people who are maybe more hands-on learners are comfortable with this. There are definitely people who really thrive in a sort of traditional university environment. So, it's a choice for people. It's you have to be self-directed. Like, people who don't, one of the things we push our facilitators to do a little bit is, even though we say self-paced, a lot of people really benefit from having some timelines, and expectations. So the more self-reliant you are, the more, you can drive your own schedule. I think the more you'll be successful in this. But
Great. And then let's see, Lisa says that, oh gosh, I see on your website that you do offer graduate credit if educators want. How does the course for credit work with micro-credentials?
Okay, so we offer through, I mean, I work for a university, right? So through UCLA Extension, we offer 1 graduate credit for each micro-credential. Sometimes I'm hesitant to talk about that because it almost goes against the spirit of the micro-credentials. But the reason that we do that is just the reality that teachers face. We have teachers who have, well, New Hampshire's a great example where they're actually using the teachers who complete the micro-credentials for certification in New Hampshire also have to complete the graduate credit. It's a little more work. They have to do a research paper. Not a big long one, but they have to do one because their state will only accept university credit towards certification. So it's a little bit of a, sort of an extra loop that's available for people in places where the micro-credential credit isn't accepted on its face value. So.
Got it. And then I think our last question comes from Teresa, and this is a great question. I can't wait to hear how you answer this. She asked if there are studies on student outcomes of teachers who've gone through the program and received the endorsement or certification.
We are actually in the 3rd year of a 4-year random control trial study that has, I want to say 100 teachers in Manchester, New Hampshire, and 100 teachers in Washington State, a couple of different districts, where looking at student outcomes on a school basis, where half the schools participated 1 year and the second half had to participate in the second year. So we have a lot of anecdotal evidence, but we are in the midst of an actual rigorous trial to document student outcomes on the process. So I could answer that probably next year. I can't tell you anything now, but
well, we will all wait with bated breath. Thank you both so much to our panelists. We really appreciate your expertise and willingness to share about this unique program and the unique process in Rhode Island. I'm gonna kick it back to Virgil to take us off.
Yes, thank you, Jennifer, Laureen, and Kristen, for sharing this great learner-centered work that very much is focusing on the needs of our young people while also supporting the older learners who are partnering and serving our learning community. So thank you so much. And I appreciate the emojis, the pop-ups, the AI pop-ups that our participants are also sharing. So thank you for that feedback. We also, for those that are attending, love to invite you to our annual symposium, which this year will be in New Orleans, and we'll highlight Kristen and Laureen and their work. And you can continue to engage with them in New Orleans in November. Excited to have that. And have you, those of you posting really great questions, there will be 1,100 other educators just like you and Laureen and Kristen that are leading transformative changes in service of young people in the learning communities who love them. So we'd welcome you into New Orleans and would be excited to see you there and meet you. Before we conclude, or as we conclude this webinar, like any good educator and continuous improvement cycle, we will have a survey. Please share your feedback. It's how we grow and learn from each of you. Thank you all. And thanks again, Laureen, Jennifer, and Kristen for sharing your wisdom. Appreciate you all. Take care.